I'm Sarah, 28, and I thought the worst part about being excluded from my sister's wedding was the humiliation. I was wrong. While I was sipping my tais in Maui watching the sunset paint the Pacific golden, my phone exploded with missed calls. The wedding I wasn't invited to had just been raided by the FBI. My perfect sister Emma, the golden child who could do no wrong, was now in federal custody. And somehow my petty decision to escape to Hawaii had just saved me from becoming an accessory to her crimes. Before we dive into this wild ride of family betrayal and federal investigations, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below and smash that like button if you've ever felt like black sheep of your family. Trust me, you'll want to subscribe and hit the notification bell because this story has more twists than a pretzel factory, and the karma that comes back around is absolutely chef's kiss. Now let me take you back to where this all began. Growing up, I always knew Emma was the favorite. It wasn't subtle. My parents practically had neon signs pointing at her achievements while mine collected dust in the corner. She was valedictorian. I graduated with a respectable B average. She went to Harvard Business School on a full scholarship. I chose community college and worked my way through state university. She landed a six-figure job at a prestigious consulting firm right out of college. I became a social worker helping at-risk youth. But the real kicker, my parents acted like her success was somehow their doing, while my career choice was treated like a personal failure. "Sarah, when are you going to get a real job?" my mother would ask, at every family dinner while simultaneously bragging to the neighbors about Emma's latest promotion or luxury apartment downtown. The favoritism reached peak toxicity when Emma announced her engagement to Marcus, a guy I'd introduced her to at my birthday party 2 years earlier. Instead of thanking me for playing matchmaker, my parents immediately began planning the wedding of the century. They hired a wedding planner, booked the most exclusive country club in town, and started dropping hints about a guest list that would include only the most important people in our lives. I should have seen the writing on the wall when they stopped asking for my input about anything wedding-related. When I'd bring up dress shopping or ask about my role in the ceremony, the responses became increasingly vague. "Oh, we'll figure that out later," or "Emma has very specific ideas about how she wants things." The exclusion became official 3 months before the wedding. I was visiting for Sunday dinner when Emma casually mentioned needing to finalize the guest list. I offered to help, thinking maybe this was my chance to finally be included in the planning process. "Actually," Emma said, not even looking up from her phone, "we've decided to keep things really intimate. Just immediate family and close friends." I laughed, thinking she was joking. "Well, yeah, I'm immediate family." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents suddenly became very interested in their mashed potatoes, and Emma finally looked up with that fake sympathetic expression she'd perfected over the years. "Sarah, you have to understand. This wedding is really important to Marcus's career. His boss will be there, along with some major clients. We need people who can contribute to the right atmosphere." "What exactly are you saying?" I asked, though my heart was already sinking. My father cleared his throat. "Honey, what Emma means is that this is a professional networking opportunity as much as it is a celebration. The guest list needs to reflect a certain standard." Translation: my social work salary and modest lifestyle didn't meet their newly elevated expectations. I wasn't wealthy enough, successful enough, or impressive enough to be seen at their precious, perfect wedding. "You're uninviting me from my own sister's wedding because I don't make enough money?" I asked, my voice rising. "Don't be dramatic," my mother chimed in. "We're not uninviting you. We're just being selective about the guest list." "It's the same thing." I stood up my chair, scraping against the floor. "This is insane." "I'm your daughter," Emma rolled her eyes. "God, Sarah, everything doesn't have to be about you. This is my day. Can't you just be supportive?" "Supportive of what? Being treated like I don't exist." "Maybe if you'd made better choices in life you wouldn't feel so insecure about these situations," Emma said coolly. That's when something inside me snapped. Not the screaming, crying kind of snap. The cold, calculated kind. I looked around the table at my parents, who were nodding along with Emma's assessment, like it was perfectly reasonable to exclude their own daughter from a family celebration because she chose a career helping others instead of climbing the corporate ladder. You know what I said? My voice eerily calm. You're absolutely right. I have made some poor choices, like thinking family actually mattered to any of you. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, ignoring their calls to not leave angry and think about this rationally. But I was thinking rationally. I was thinking that I'd spent 28 years trying to earn love and acceptance from people who would never give it. I was thinking that I'd been invited to acquaintances' weddings but was being excluded from my own sisters'. And I was thinking that if they wanted to pretend I didn't exist, I'd make that incredibly easy for them. Walking to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years when it came to my family freedom. No more walking on eggshells, no more trying to prove my worth, no more accepting scraps of attention and calling it love. By the time I got home to my modest apartment, I'd made a decision. If they were going to have their perfect wedding without me, I was going to have a perfect vacation without them. I opened my laptop and started browsing flights to Hawaii. I'd always wanted to visit Maui, and my savings account from living below my means could actually afford it. As I clicked purchase on a 7-day trip to paradise scheduled for the exact week of Emma's wedding, I felt lighter than I had in months. Let them have their stuffy country club celebration with their impressive guest list. I'd be sipping cocktails on the beach, getting a tan, and finally putting myself first for once in my life. I didn't tell them about my plans. When they called to smooth things over and suggest I could attend the reception but not the ceremony, how generous, I simply said I wouldn't be available that weekend. The hurt in their voices when I refused to elaborate was almost satisfying. Almost. What I couldn't have predicted was that my petty act of self-care would accidentally make me the smartest person in the family. Maui was everything I dreamed it would be and more. I'd booked a modest resort in Kihei, nothing fancy, but my ocean view room felt like luxury compared to the emotional prison I'd been living in back home. For the first 3 days I did absolutely nothing productive, and it was glorious. I slept in, read trashy romance novels by the pool, took long walks on the beach, and treated myself to dinners at restaurants that cost more than I usually spent on food in a week. The best part, my phone stayed mostly silent. A few texts from my parents asking me to reconsider my stubbornness but otherwise blessed peace. I'd turned off all social media notifications because the last thing I wanted was to see wedding prep photos that would remind me of what I was missing. On Thursday, the day before Emma's wedding, I decided to treat myself to a snorkeling excursion to Molokini Crater. The tour guide, a local guy named Kai with an infectious smile, made jokes about escaping mainland drama while swimming with tropical fish. If only he knew how accurate that was. The water was crystal clear, and for the first time in months, my mind felt the same way. Floating above a coral reef, watching colorful fish dart between the formations, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this peaceful. Every muscle in my body had been tense for so long that I'd forgotten what relaxation actually felt like. That evening, I splurged on a sunset dinner cruise. The boat was filled with couples celebrating anniversaries and families on vacation, all happy and laughing together. Instead of feeling lonely, I felt proud. I'd chosen to value myself when my own family wouldn't. I'd invested in my own happiness instead of begging for scraps of theirs. As the sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, I raised my Mai Tai in a toast to myself. Here's to making better choices, I said quietly, watching the last sliver of sun disappear into the Pacific. Friday arrived with perfect weather. Sunny 82 degrees with a gentle trade wind that made the palm trees dance. I'd planned a hiking day, wanting to see the famous bamboo forest and waterfalls along the road to Hana. But first I treated myself to room service breakfast on my balcony, complete with fresh pineapple and Kona coffee. It was around 10 a.m. Hawaii time, 4 p.m. back home, when my phone started buzzing. The first call was from my mother, which I ignored. Then my father. Then Emma. Then my mother again. By the fifth call in 10 minutes, I started to worry that maybe someone was hurt. I answered my mother's call with a cautious, "Hello, Sarah." Oh, my God, where are you? My mother's voice was panicked, breathless. Why? What's wrong? Is someone hurt? The wedding, the FBI, they arrested Emma. For a moment I thought I'd misheard. What did you just say? The FBI raided the wedding. Right in the middle of the ceremony, they arrested Emma and Marcus and some other people. Sarah, they're saying something about fraud and money laundering. The Mai Tai from the night before suddenly felt like lead in my stomach. Mom, slow down. What exactly happened? Through her sobs and hyperventilated explanations, I pieced together the basics. The ceremony had just reached the speak now or forever hold your peace part when federal agents burst through the doors of the country club. They'd arrested Emma, Marcus, and several wedding guests, all apparently connected to some massive financial scheme. They're calling it a Ponzi scheme, my father's voice came through the background. Something about Marcus's consulting firm being a front for investment fraud. I sat down heavily on my hotel room chair, staring out at the peaceful ocean, while my family's world imploded 2500 miles away. How long has this been going on? We don't know anything. Emma won't talk to us, and the lawyers are saying it could be years of legal battles. Sarah, you have to come home. Why? The question came out sharper than I intended. 2 weeks ago, I wasn't good enough to attend this wedding. Now you need me. This isn't the time for no, Mom. This is exactly the time. For months you've treated me like an embarrassment because I chose to help people instead of chase money. Now it turns out your golden child was stealing money and you want my support. The silence on the other end was telling. In the background, I could hear chaos. People talking, car doors slamming, what sounded like reporters asking questions. Are you seriously not coming home? My mother finally asked. I looked out at the palm trees swaying in the breeze, then at my hiking backpack sitting ready by the door. I'm in the middle of a vacation. The vacation I planned because my own family didn't want me at their most important celebration. I think I'll finish it. Sarah, please, Mom, I love you. But I spent 28 years trying to prove I was worthy of this family's respect. Emma apparently spent her recent years committing federal crimes, yet somehow I'm the one who was too shameful to be seen at her wedding. Do you see the irony here? More silence. Then, quietly, where are you? Somewhere beautiful, peaceful, and apparently much safer than that country club. I paused, watching a sea turtle surface in the distance. I'll call you tomorrow. I hung up and immediately turned my phone back to airplane mode. Whatever chaos was happening at home, it had been brewing long before I got on that plane. The FBI doesn't just show up at weddings without serious prior investigation, which meant that while my parents were planning the perfect celebration and deciding I wasn't worthy to attend, federal agents were building a case against their precious daughter. The universe, it seemed, had a wicked sense of humor. I grabbed my hiking backpack and headed out to explore the bamboo forest. For once in my life, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I should have turned my phone back on sooner, but honestly, those waterfalls along the road to Hana were more therapeutic than any family drama back home. It wasn't until Saturday evening, after a full day of hiking and a beachside massage, that I finally checked my messages. My phone practically had a meltdown from the backlog. 47 missed calls, 83 text messages, and 12 voicemails. But it wasn't just my family blowing up my phone. There were messages from old high school friends, former colleagues, even my landlord. Apparently, this thing had made national news. The voicemail from my college roommate Jessica was the most informative. Sarah, oh my God, turn on CNN, your sister is on the news. They're calling it the wedding day takedown and saying it's the biggest Ponzi scheme bust in the state's history. Girl, call me back. People are asking if you're okay. I grabbed the remote and turned on the news in my hotel room. Sure enough, there was footage of the country club I'd been deemed unworthy to enter, now swarming with FBI agents and news crews. The chyron read, "Wedding turned federal bust, $50 million fraud scheme exposed." The reporter was standing outside the venue, explaining how Marcus's consulting firm, Premier Investment Solutions, had been operating as an elaborate Ponzi scheme for over 3 years. They'd been targeting wealthy retirees and small business owners, promising unrealistic returns on fake investment opportunities. The wedding guest list apparently had included both co-conspirators and unknowing victims who'd been invited specifically to be pitched additional investment opportunities during the reception. My stomach dropped as the pieces clicked together. The professional networking opportunity. The need for guests who could contribute to the right atmosphere. They weren't just excluding me because I wasn't successful enough, they were planning to use the wedding as a hunting ground for new victims. I grabbed my laptop and started digging deeper. News articles were already detailing the scope of the operation. Marcus had apparently been running this scheme since before he even met Emma, but she'd become instrumental in helping him identify and target victims. Her job at the prestigious consulting firm wasn't just a job, she was head of client acquisition, which was a fancy way of saying she was the one who charmed people into handing over their life savings. The more I read, the sicker I felt. There were interviews with victims. Elderly couples who'd lost their retirement funds. Small business owners who'd invested their company's cash flow. Young families who'd cashed out their children's college funds. All because they'd trusted the polished presentations and fake testimonials that Emma and Marcus had crafted. One article mentioned that the FBI had been investigating for over a year, using undercover agents and wiretaps to build their case. They'd deliberately chosen the wedding day for the arrests because they knew all the major players would be in one place, and the shock factor would prevent anyone from destroying evidence or fleeing. My phone rang, Jessica calling back. This time I answered. "Sarah, thank God, I've been worried sick about you. Are you okay? Are you safe?" I'm fine. I'm actually in Hawaii." "Hawaii? Wait, you weren't at the wedding?" The question hit me like a freight train. I hadn't been at the wedding. While my parents were watching their golden child get arrested, while their carefully curated guest list was being investigated for fraud, while their precious reputation was being destroyed on national television, I was swimming with sea turtles and watching sunsets. "No," I said slowly. "They didn't invite me." "Holy shit, Sarah. You might be the luckiest person alive right now." She was right. If I'd been at that wedding, I would have been questioned by the FBI. My name would be in every news report as the fraud suspect's sister who was present at the bust. My job working with at-risk youth would probably be in jeopardy. Who wants a social worker whose family is connected to financial crimes? But here's what really gets me. I wasn't just randomly excluded from that guest list. Looking back at all the conversations, all the vague comments about the right kind of people and professional networking opportunities, I realized they'd specifically excluded me because they knew what they were planning to do. My parents had to have known. There's no way Emma was running a multi-million-dollar fraud operation without them having some awareness, especially given how involved they were in her life and career. They'd protected themselves by keeping me away, but not because they were trying to protect me. Because they were trying to protect their operation from someone who might ask uncomfortable questions. Remember, I'm a social worker. I'm trained to spot financial abuse and exploitation. I've helped dozens of elderly clients who've fallen victim to scams. If I'd been at that wedding, if I'd heard the investment opportunity pitches during cocktail hour, I would have recognized the red flags immediately. They didn't exclude me because I wasn't successful enough. They excluded me because I was exactly the wrong kind of successful, the kind that might have blown up their entire scheme before they could milk it for millions more. I called Jessica back after processing this revelation. "Jess, I need you to do me a favor. Can you record the news coverage and send it to me, all of it? I want to see exactly how this played out." "Of course, but why?" "Because for the first time in my life I want to watch my family's perfect event from start to finish." The irony was suffocating. For months I'd beaten myself up about not being good enough for their standards. I'd questioned my career choices, my lifestyle, my worth as a human being. I'd felt shame about being excluded from what should have been a joyful family celebration. But now I understood that being excluded wasn't a rejection. It was accidentally the best thing that ever happened to me. While I was learning to paddleboard and eating fresh poke bowls, my family's house of cards was finally collapsing. While I was having deep conversations with strangers about life and happiness, Emma was being read her Miranda rights. The universe had literally saved me from disaster by making my family's love conditional on standards I couldn't meet. Their rejection had become my protection. If you're watching this and you've ever felt like the odd one out in your family, like you don't measure up to their expectations, I want you to remember this moment. Sometimes being excluded from the wrong thing is the same as being selected for the right thing. Sometimes the family that rejects you is actually protecting you from their own dysfunction, even if that's not their intention. But trust me, this story gets even crazier. Because the FBI raid wasn't just about Emma and Marcus, it was about an entire network of fraud that went deeper than anyone imagined. By Sunday morning, my peaceful Hawaiian vacation had transformed into a surreal experience of watching my family's destruction from paradise. I'd spent the night reading every article, watching every news segment, and trying to piece together how deep this rabbit hole went. What I discovered made my exclusion from the wedding feel like divine intervention. The FBI had released additional details about the investigation, and it was worse than I'd initially understood. Marcus's consulting firm wasn't just running a simple Ponzi scheme. They were part of a sophisticated network of financial crimes that included money laundering, tax evasion, and elder abuse. The operation had tentacles reaching into multiple states, and Emma wasn't just a participant, she was apparently one of the masterminds. According to the federal complaint, which was now public record, Emma had been instrumental in developing what they called the social circle strategy. She'd systematically cultivated relationships with wealthy individuals through country clubs, charity events, and professional organizations, then slowly introduced them to Marcus's exclusive investment opportunities. She'd even created fake personas and backstories to gain trust with potential victims. But here's the part that made my blood run cold. My parents were listed as persons of interest in the investigation. Not just innocent bystanders who got caught up in their daughter's crimes, active persons of interest. The complaint detailed how their home had been used as a meeting location for potential investors, how my mother had hosted investment seminars disguised as charity fundraiser planning meetings, how my father had used his connections at the bank where he'd worked for 30 years to help legitimize some of Marcus's fake business entities. I sat on my hotel balcony, watching the sunrise paint the ocean gold, trying to reconcile this information with the parents who'd raised me. The same people who'd taught me about honesty and integrity were apparently helping to defraud innocent people out of their life savings. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Riley, who lived across the country and hadn't spoken to my immediate family in years. Sarah saw the news. "Are you okay? Also wanted you to know. Uncle Tom tried to get me to invest with Emma's boyfriend about 6 months ago. Something felt off, so I said no. Glad I trusted my gut. This was exactly what I'd feared. The scheme wasn't just targeting strangers, they were going after our own extended family members. People who trusted my parents who had no reason to suspect they were being set up for financial ruin." I called Riley back immediately. "Tell me everything about that conversation with Dad." "It was weird, Sarah. He called out of nowhere, which never happens, and started asking about my business, how things were going financially. Then he mentioned this brilliant young man Emma was dating, who was helping people optimize their portfolios for retirement. Said he'd helped several family friends double their money in less than 2 years. Did he mention specific amounts? Yeah, he said the Hendersons had invested $50,000 and were seeing incredible returns, and the Johnsons had just put in another $100,000 after their initial success. I knew both families. The Hendersons were family friends who'd retired 5 years ago after selling their small manufacturing business. The Johnsons were my parents' next-door neighbors who'd always been careful with money, saving every penny for retirement after raising 4 kids. "Riley, did you know the Hendersons and Johnsons were at the wedding?" "What wedding?" "Oh, Emma's wedding that just got raided." "No, I had no idea." The picture was becoming clearer and more horrifying. My parents hadn't just enabled Emma and Marcus's crimes, they'd systematically targeted their own friends and neighbors. People who'd trusted them for decades were being funneled into a fraudulent investment scheme, and the wedding was supposed to be the grand finale where they'd seal even bigger deals with the wealthy attendees. I spent the rest of Sunday making calls to relatives and family friends, ostensibly to check on everyone after the shocking news. What I discovered was a pattern of financial conversations that had been happening for months. My parents had been testing the waters with extended family, longtime friends, and even former colleagues, gauging their financial situations and planting seeds about incredible investment opportunities. The most heartbreaking call was with Mrs. Chen, my elderly neighbor who'd babysat me when I was little. She'd invested her late husband's life insurance payout, $35,000, based on my mother's recommendation. She was supposed to receive her guaranteed returns next month to help pay for her granddaughter's college tuition. "I trusted your mother completely," Mrs. Chen said, her voice shaky. "She showed me all the paperwork, explained how safe it was. She said Emma had personally verified everything." I hung up and immediately called a lawyer I knew through work, someone who specialized in elder abuse cases. I explained the situation and asked what Mrs. Chen's options were. "Unfortunately, most Ponzi scheme victims recover very little of their initial investment," he said. "But if she was specifically targeted because of her relationship with your parents, and if they used that trust relationship to exploit her, there might be additional criminal charges possible." That evening I finally called my parents back. My mother answered on the first ring. "Sarah, thank God, when are you coming home? We need you here. The lawyers are saying, Mom, I need to ask you something and I need you to tell me the truth." "Did you know what Emma and Marcus were doing?" The pause was too long. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, defensive, careful. "Sarah, we had no idea the business was. We thought Marcus was legitimate. That's not what I asked. I asked if you knew what they were doing. I didn't ask if you knew it was illegal." Another pause. We knew they were raising money from investors. We thought we were helping friends access good investment opportunities." "Mom, did you take any money from this? Did you and Dad receive any payments for bringing in investors?" "It wasn't like that, Marcus, just, he gave us gifts sometimes. To thank us for introductions. But we never asked for anything, there it was. They hadn't just known. They'd been getting kickbacks. My parents, who'd excluded me from their daughter's wedding because I wasn't successful enough, had been profiting from a scheme that was stealing retirement funds from their elderly friends. I was sitting in paradise, watching another perfect sunset, while my family's moral bankruptcy was being exposed on national television. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Monday brought a media circus that I was grateful to observe from 2,500 miles away. My phone was ringing constantly. Reporters who'd somehow gotten my number asking for comments about my family's alleged criminal enterprise. I'd turned off all social media notifications, but Jessica was keeping me updated on the online chaos. "Your family's case is trending on Twitter," she texted me. "People are calling it Number Weddinggate and sharing conspiracy theories about how long this has been going on." The conspiracy theories, as it turned out, weren't far from the truth. By Monday afternoon, the FBI had released additional information that painted an even more disturbing picture. The investigation had started 3 years ago, not 1 year like initially reported. An undercover agent had been embedded in the country club where Emma and Marcus had been recruiting victims, posing as a wealthy recent retiree interested in investment opportunities. According to the federal complaint, the agent had recorded dozens of conversations with Emma, Marcus, and my parents over the past 18 months. They had hours of evidence showing my family systematically targeting vulnerable people, crafting elaborate lies about investment returns, and celebrating their successful cons over expensive dinners. The most damning evidence was a recording from last Christmas where Emma and my parents were planning the wedding guest list specifically around investment potential. They'd categorized potential guests by net worth and susceptibility to influence, with notes about recent life changes that might make them more vulnerable to financial manipulation. "Recent widows are perfect," Emma was recorded saying. Grief makes people want to secure their future, and they're usually dealing with insurance payouts or inheritance money they're not sure how to handle. My mother's voice was clear on the recording. Don't forget about the Hendersons. Tom mentioned they're worried about healthcare costs in retirement. That's exactly the kind of fear we can work with. I had to stop reading the transcripts. These weren't strangers discussing business strategies. This was my family planning to exploit the genuine fears and vulnerabilities of people they'd known for decades. But the revelations weren't over. Tuesday's news cycle brought information that hit even closer to home. The FBI had discovered that Marcus and Emma had been planning to expand their operation internationally, using the wedding as a way to connect with wealthy foreign nationals who'd been invited as Marcus's business associates. More importantly, they'd been planning to bring me into the operation after the wedding. There were emails between Emma and Marcus discussing how my bleeding heart social worker image would be perfect for targeting middle-class families who might be suspicious of overtly wealthy financial advisors. Sarah's whole do-gooder thing is actually an asset, Emma had written. People trust her. She could bring in the teachers, nurses, firefighters, people with steady incomes and pension funds to steal. They'd been planning to use my reputation, my relationships with colleagues, and the families I'd helped to expand their victim pool. The wedding exclusion wasn't just about protecting their operation from my potential interference. It was about keeping me naive and available for future exploitation. I called the FBI field office handling the case and spoke with Agent Rodriguez, who was leading the investigation. I explained that I'd been excluded from the wedding and had been in Hawaii during the arrests, but that I wanted to cooperate fully with their investigation. Miss Thompson, we're actually very interested in speaking with you, Agent Rodriguez said. Your exclusion from the wedding was noted in our surveillance, and we have evidence suggesting your family was planning to involve you in their operation. I want to help, I said. I work with vulnerable families every day. The idea that my own family was planning to use my relationships to target people makes me sick. We'll need you to come in for a formal interview when you return, but I can tell you that your cooperation will be noted. You're not a target of this investigation. Based on our surveillance and financial records, you had no knowledge of or participation in these crimes. After hanging up, I realized something profound. My family's rejection had saved me not just from being at the scene of a federal raid, but from becoming a federal criminal myself. If I'd been included in their circle, if I'd been deemed worthy of their success, I would have eventually been offered a role in their criminal enterprise. And knowing my family's skills of manipulation and my own desire to finally belong, I might have said yes. The thought terrified me. How many small compromises would it have taken? How many times would they have asked me to just introduce Marcus to a few colleagues or mention this great investment opportunity to some families you work with before I was in too deep to back out? Wednesday brought the most shocking revelation yet. The scheme wasn't just about money laundering and investment fraud. Marcus had been using the stolen funds to finance other criminal activities, including drug trafficking and illegal arms sales. The wedding wasn't just a networking event for financial crimes. It was a meeting for multiple criminal enterprises. Several of the arrested wedding guests weren't just fraud co-conspirators. They were part of a broader criminal network that the FBI had been investigating for years. The guest list read like a who's who of organized crime figures from across the region. My parents hadn't just gotten involved in a white-collar financial scheme. They'd become part of an organized crime network that was responsible for drug distribution, weapons trafficking, and international money laundering. The same people who'd taught me about right and wrong had been hosting criminals in their home and introducing them to innocent victims at country club mixers. I thought about all the times they'd criticized my career choice, asking when I was going to get serious about making money. All the times they'd made me feel ashamed for choosing to help people instead of focusing on financial success. Meanwhile, they were making money by destroying people's lives in the most systematic and cruel way possible. The FBI estimated that the total victims' losses would exceed $50 million. $50 million stolen from retirement accounts, college funds, business investments, and life insurance payouts. Money that represented decades of hard work, careful saving, and dreams for the future. And my family had been at the center of it all, planning to use my credibility and relationships to make it even worse. Thursday morning brought the call I'd been both dreading and anticipating. Agent Rodriguez informed me that Emma had decided to cooperate with the FBI investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. She was providing information about the entire criminal network, including detailed testimony about my parents' involvement and the planned expansion that would have included me. Your sister's cooperation is helping us identify additional victims and recover some of the stolen assets, Agent Rodriguez explained. But more importantly for you, her testimony confirms that you were deliberately kept out of the operation until after the wedding, when they planned to gradually recruit you. Emma's confession, which was leaked to the media later that day, painted a picture of calculated family manipulation that went back years. She admitted that every family gathering, every criticism of my career choices, every comparison between our success levels, had been part of a long-term psychological campaign to make me desperate enough for their approval that I'd eventually compromise my ethics. Sarah was the perfect mark, Emma was quoted as saying in court documents. She was so eager to finally be accepted by the family that she would have done anything we asked. We just needed to break down her resistance first. Reading those words while sitting on a beach in Maui was surreal. My own sister had been systematically, psychologically manipulating me for years, not out of sibling rivalry or natural competitiveness, but as part of a criminal recruitment strategy. Every time I'd felt hurt by their exclusion, every moment I'd questioned my worth, had been artificially manufactured to make me vulnerable to their eventual criminal proposition. But here's what Emma hadn't counted on: by pushing their psychological manipulation too far with the wedding exclusion, they'd accidentally triggered my self-preservation instincts instead of my desperation. Instead of making me more eager for their approval, they'd finally made me angry enough to choose myself over their acceptance. Friday brought news of the sentencing recommendations. Marcus was looking at 25 to 30 years in federal prison. Emma, with her cooperation, might get 15 to 20 years. My parents, as peripheral conspirators who'd facilitated the scheme but hadn't been primary architects, were facing 5 to 10 years each. The financial restitution requirements were staggering. The court had frozen all their assets. The house I'd grown up in, their retirement accounts, even Emma's engagement ring was being auctioned to compensate victims. Mrs. Chen would get back about 60% of her stolen money. The Hendersons would recover roughly half. Not because I was avoiding going home, but because I wanted to finish processing this experience in the place where I'd accidentally found safety. I spent Saturday hiking to the summit of Haleakala, watching the sunrise from 1,000 feet above sea level. The perspective was literal and metaphorical. Sometimes you have to get far enough away from a situation to see it clearly. From that summit, watching the sun illuminate the island below, I realized that my family's rejection hadn't just saved me from criminal prosecution. It had freed me from a lifetime of seeking validation from people who were fundamentally incapable of providing it, not because they didn't love me, but because they'd lost the ability to love anything more than money, status, and control. Sunday, my last day in Hawaii, I finally turned my phone back to normal mode and called Mrs. Chen. I wanted to apologize, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. She deserved to hear from someone in my family who was genuinely sorry about what had happened to her. "Oh, Sarah," she said, when I explained who was calling. "I'm so glad you're safe. When I saw the news and realized you weren't at that wedding, I was so relieved." "Mrs. Chen, I am so sorry about your money, about what they did to you. Honey, you didn't do anything wrong. In fact, I think you might be the only member of your family who turned out right. Your parents forgot who they raised you to be, but you didn't forget." When I flew home on Monday, I had a plan. I'd arranged to meet with Agent Rodriguez to provide my full cooperation with the ongoing investigation. I'd also contacted a lawyer about helping Mrs. Chen and other elderly victims navigate the restitution process. Most importantly, I'd made an appointment with a therapist who specialized in family trauma and manipulation. The house where I'd grown up was empty when I drove by. My parents were out on bail but staying with relatives while their home was being processed as part of the federal investigation. Yellow tape still surrounded the property and news vans occasionally drove by hoping for updates. Instead of feeling sad about my family's destroyed legacy, I felt something unexpected relief. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't have to pretend their approval mattered. I didn't have to make excuses for their behavior or try to live up to standards set by people who turned out to be criminals. My coworkers welcomed me back with genuine concern and support. My supervisor had already spoken with federal investigators to confirm that my work with at-risk families was completely unrelated to my family's crimes and my job was secure. In fact, several colleagues mentioned that my experience might actually make me better at helping families recognize and escape financial abuse situations. 6 months later, Emma was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. Marcus got 30 years. My parents each received 7 years with the possibility of reduced sentences if they continued cooperating with ongoing investigations into the broader criminal network. I attended Mrs. Chen's granddaughter's college graduation, which was made possible by the restitution payments she'd received. She introduced me to her family as the good one from the Thompson family, and I realized that sometimes the best thing you can inherit from your family is the determination to be nothing like them. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and personal integrity? Have you experienced that moment when you realized that the people demanding your loyalty were the ones least deserving of it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the most difficult family situations teach us the most valuable lessons about standing up for ourselves. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family drama, unexpected justice, and the power of choosing yourself when others won't. And share this video with anyone who needs to hear that sometimes being excluded from the wrong thing is the same as being selected for the right thing. Thank you for taking this journey with me from family rejection to federal investigation to personal liberation. Remember, when people show you who they really are through their actions, believe them the first time. Your intuition about toxic family dynamics might just save your life, or at least your freedom. Until next time, choose yourself first, trust your instincts, and never let anyone make you feel ashamed for having integrity in a world that often rewards the opposite.